Australian Doctors sends Australian volunteer doctors over to Papua New Guinea to work in the really remote parts of the region. We partner with local health service providers and we form a patrol team. And the patrol team goes out to very remote parts of Papua New Guinea and delivers clinical services, but importantly partners with those local healthcare providers to train them up and provide upskilling opportunities on anything from malaria diagnosis to emergency obstetrics training. So that upskilling of healthcare workers is a really growing, important part of ADI's work in Papua New Guinea. We're not daunted by walking 8 hours in mud or getting on a banana boat for 4 hours along the coastline in New Ireland. That's our job. So ADI has a range of donors that we gratefully receive funding from the small, the families and the individuals who have some interest in Papua New Guinea or the health work that we're doing there, right up to corporate Australian organisations as well as Papua New Guinean. Across that range of donors, we use the ACFID Fundraising Charter to guide our decision-making in sourcing those funds. So ADI has an ethical charter and we do exclude some organisations that work in certain sectors: tobacco, weapons, gambling, exploitative credit, or those engaging in conflict financing by providing funds. Then we've got another set of sectors where we would put them under some scrutiny. So there are more organisations in the areas of agriculture in developing countries. So, for example, palm oil could be an example there. Construction and land development sectors, energy production and distribution sectors, and resource extraction, so mining, quarrying and timber harvesting. These are sectors that aren't automatically excluded, but we take a good due diligence process in assessing partnerships and donations from organisations in those sectors. I'd like to tell you about an example where we made a decision to reject a donation offer from a corporate. We went through a due diligence of the organisation as part of our program management processes, and a couple of red flags were raised to us. One was from the communities that we work with in that area, and the second was about their environmental standards and track record, which we investigated. We took that through to our risk management committee, and they raised that as a matter to the board. That process and those committees decided to reject the donation from that organisation. So that really was a good test case of how our processes work and the application of our ethical framework and the ACFID Fundraising Charter. ADI's board structure is supported by a number of committees, and one of those is our revenue committee, and that includes 2 individuals who are on the board as well as some other interested friends of ADI. I'm on that committee as well. We meet monthly. We have a terms of reference and we have a fundraising and communications engagement handbook that we operate within. That committee reports up to the board on targets for grants and foundations that we're applying for and targets on our fundraising goals. In conjunction with the Australian Expat Volunteer, we've been working on building the capacity of our Papua New Guinean staff member to work on submitting budgets for each patrol that they then send to the Sydney office and the finance manager for approval. Then we transfer the appropriate funding required for that budget, and then that is distributed as it's needed for each patrol. And to minimise risk and fraud, we have collapsed the time frame of that and ensured those checks through double signatures on the receipt of funds and the closing of the cash balance. We require receipts and we do reconciliation of the expenditure against the budget at the end of each patrol, and that's then acquitted and returned back to the finance manager in Sydney office. And all of that process is done with minimising cash. That's to minimise our risk exposure, and we try and use credit cards where we can manage those from Sydney. ACFID released a new code of conduct and there was a greater emphasis on fraud. And so that prompted us to take a fresh look at our practices around that. So we engaged an external consultant who came and met with our finance manager, the treasurer who sits on the board, and the vice president of ADI. There was an indication of the need for ADI to expand our definition of fraud. So it now includes fraud, corruption, counterterrorism, money laundering, and violation of sanctions as imposed by the Australian government. So we actioned that advice from this commissioned consultant and improved our policies around that and flowing on from that, our practices. We're constantly preparing for the annual report throughout the year. It's a huge team effort. We take great records in terms of collation of data and record keeping. And constantly that information is flowing from the programs back to the monitoring and evaluation team that work on receiving that information and making sense of it and providing meaningful feedback back to Papua New Guinea and our partners there. Just this year, I got a lovely email from a particular donor. He wrote to share his, appreciation and gratitude of the contents and the way we describe the work that we do and the connections we make to the work that we do and our fundraising efforts. And so he just wrote to comment on that, and he actually increased his donation support to ADI that year. So that really spoke to me about the importance of sharing these genuine stories through our annual report, which we seek to do every year, and I'm working on writing this year's annual report now.